Okay, so let's chant the prayer. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Thank you. So we'll continue with chapter 4. Anyone remembers what's the title of chapter 4? Karma Yoga.
Transcendental knowledge.
Oh, shoot. So transcendental knowledge. We'll have Karma Yoga actually in Krishna consciousness. You're kind of jumping ahead a bit. That's going to be the next chapter. So we read a lot about knowledge in this chapter, knowledge about Krishna. Krishna gave some knowledge about himself in response to Arjuna's question about, in fact, anyone remembers what Arjuna asked at the beginning of this chapter? He had a doubt.
About the age, about his age, because he gave the information to Ikshvaku. No, to
Sun god.
Sun God, and he's claiming, well, it doesn't make sense because he's older than.
Yeah, so the sun god is much older than you. How is it that you taught him? Najani, very good, very good. Okay, so, and then in response, Krishna gave some knowledge about himself. Then we read about karma on the platform of Jnana, how to understand action. Remember that verse, karmanya, karmaya, pasheda, karmani, cha karmaya, one who sees action in an action, in an action, in action. How to understand what is action, what causes reaction. And then we read about all the different kinds of sacrifices and what's common in them. They all lead to transcendental knowledge. And now, the last few verses, we read about what are the consequences of this knowledge, what does one achieve by the knowledge. Remember, the knowledge burns up all the reactions to sinful activities, and it takes one out just like a boat takes one across the ocean. The knowledge takes us across the material ocean. So that's where we are. And then previous verse was about somebody who doesn't have doubts, faithful man. And now we'll read about somebody who does have doubts. Agyascha sadadhanascha samshayatma vinashyati nayam lokosti na paro na sukham samshayatmanaha. Aline?
With ignorant and faithless persons who doubt the revealed scriptures do not attain God consciousness. They fall down. For the doubting soul, there is happiness neither in this world nor in the next.
It's very poetic, but it means that somebody who has many doubts won't be happy either in this life or in the next. Now, we spoke about this a little bit before. We'll continue speaking about it, that just having doubts on its own is not a bad thing. It's a sign of intelligence. But the question is, what do we do with our doubts? But first of all, this verse speaks about 3 levels of doubts. So for one is agya. Prabhupada says a fool who has no knowledge in the scriptures. One is ashradadana. Anyone remembers what the word shraddha means?
Faith.
Very good. I'm really happy many of you remember that. Okay, so shraddha means faith. So ashradadana, somebody who doesn't have faith. And then samshaya just means doubt. Okay, and then these 3 kinds of doubtful people. Let me find, yeah. So agya, he has no knowledge, like jnana means knowledge, agya, one who has no knowledge. They have no knowledge, no faith. They basically, in a human form, but live like an animal. They don't have any concern for higher goals. It's just how to eat, how to sleep, how to fulfill these basic needs. Then the ashratadana, they have some knowledge, but no faith. So they might have read some scriptures, they might know some philosophy, but they have no faith in it. Maybe due to some controversies, maybe very academic perspective. Some people have a PhD in Chaitanya Charitamrita, but they don't believe in Lord Chaitanya. They don't have faith in Lord Chaitanya. So a very academic perspective. And then sometimes also even among devotees in ISKCON, we find that because there are controversies and scandals and difficulties within the institution that can damage someone's faith in the philosophy, rather than understanding that these are people and it's not unwise to not have complete faith in them because they are fallible, but the philosophy is still right. It's just when people don't follow the process, they don't follow the philosophy, that's when these problems come. Okay, and the third one is samshayatma. So somebody has knowledge and even practices it, the process, but they are full of doubts. They have no hope, no optimism. Sometimes even we might feel a little depressed. I've been chanting for 1 year, 5 years, 10 years. Does it work? Maybe it works for everybody else, but the process doesn't work for me. Okay, so this is samshayatma. But transcendental knowledge destroys all three kinds of doubts. We just need to know what to do with them. Okay, so we spoke about this before, that some doubts, we can just suspend it. For example, I give this quite often, Ugrasena Maharaj had 1 billion soldiers, how could he have 1 billion soldiers in that city? But it doesn't really matter. And then other doubts, if we follow the process, then after some years we'll understand how it works. And then other doubts, we need to find someone we can reveal our doubts to and ask them about it. Anyone remembers the verse from Nectar of Instruction? The 6 loving exchanges among devotees, and then one of them is revealing the mind in confidence. I'm really happy to see Leon.
Oh, sorry.
Let's just see if Leon.
Would you like the Sanskrit or the English?
Both, if you know both. Otherwise, whichever you do know.
Dadati preta glinati goyam akati prichati bhunti boyati cheva sabadam preti dakshinam.
Very impressed, Leon. And which one is the revealing one's mind in confidence?
Come on now. Dadati preta glinati goyam akati bhunti.
Okay. Not bhukti. That's related to eating. But that's also very important, loving exchange. Anyone else remembers? I'm really impressed, Leon. Don't feel bad about it. It's very good that you still remember.
Is it Goyam Akhyati Prichati?
Yeah. So that's revealing the mind in confidence and inquiring confidentially. Very good. So this can be a loving exchange among devotees or with your spiritual master, like that. Now, faith is both a matter of choice, or not even choice, something that we kind of bring with us from our previous life, and also a matter of grace or mercy. So we have some faith that we bring with us, and then depending on how we practice, depending, the mercy we get, we can increase our faith. It's a little bit like muscles, some people are born with a little bit more muscle, some people less, but everybody can do press-ups and become stronger. Now, I'd like you to kind of think about what activities increase our faith and what activities decrease them. And I'd like to hear from a few devotees. What activities increase our faith and what activities decrease them?
I'd say that reading the Srimad Bhagavatam in the company of senior devotees definitely strengthens.
Okay, very good.
Chanting with senior devotees really helps as well.
What was it? What with senior devotees?
Chanting.
Chanting. Okay, very good.
Sending Mangalarti.
So Mangalarti helps increase your faith. Very good.
Decreasing your faith would be definitely associating with people that have got no interest in Krishna consciousness and are totally materialistic.
Okay.
Eating dodgy food as well. That isn't prasadam.
Very good. Anything else? Anyone?
Distributing books.
So distributing books increases your faith. Yeah. Okay, can you say how? Or can you just share a little bit about that?
Because when we are distributing books, we are also sharing Krishna conscious. So always we are repeating the knowledge. So it's helping. It is helping me actually.
Thank you. It's when it's your own personal experience, it becomes much stronger. And also, it's not just you repeat the knowledge, but Krishna is very pleased with you, so he gives you more faith. Okay, maybe
Thank
from
you.
Sita Sundari, and then I don't know if Hitu Prabhu wants to.
For me, actually, sometimes doing things like in the material world increases my faith because you kind of see exactly what the modes of nature. So even though I don't like to do things in mundane company, it sometimes reminds me, oh my gosh, this is really true, and I can see the modes happening. So,
Very good. So you made a really good point that one thing is the association, but the other thing is how we take on that association. So even mundane association can actually help us if we have the proper consciousness, the proper attitude, the proper perspective with which to look at it. Very good point. Thank you. Hitu Prabhu, I don't want to put you on the spot, but somehow I had this sense that you might have something to share as well.
I'd probably say when I'm doing service with devotees, because our aims, it's all aligned. And I think one of the greatest activities I probably do is serving with devotees. Like I had one devotee touch my feet today, and I know he's doing it for a joke, but these are the kind of jokes that we can have in the mundane world. We do silly things with non-devotees, but no, these are the nice things we can do with our fellow devotees.
So it's a kind of like-minded association. It increases our faith. If we feel like we are in a family, we are safe.
Because our goals, everything is the same or similar.
Very good. Thank you, Prabhu, for sharing that. Thank you. And Elaine, you got something?
Chanting, japa.
Okay. Chanting.
Because then you're with Krishna. Then actually what happens when I'm not thinking, oh, it's time to do this and that, it's actually making all those things that are not Krishna conscious like melt. I can't do japa and think of like disgusting things. It just doesn't happen. When you're doing japa, I really get beautiful ideas and beautiful thoughts when it happens, when I'm not distracted, of course. So
the association of the holy names. Very nice. Thank you. Thank you. So I guess we can share and learn from each other how to increase our faith and how to avoid things that will decrease our faith. Okay. Let's see the next verse. Yoga sanyasta karmanam jnana sanchinna samshayam atmavantam na karmani nibadnanti dhananjaya. Paramananda Prabhu.
Hare Krishna, thank you. One who acts in devotional service, renouncing the fruits of his actions, and whose doubts have been destroyed by transcendental knowledge, is situated factually in the self. Thus he is not bound by the reactions of work, O conqueror of riches.
Thank you. So this verse emphasizes that transcendental knowledge destroys doubts. So just like we spoke about what increases our faith, so also what destroys our doubts. In one sense, they're similar things, but especially for destroying doubts, knowledge transcendental knowledge is very important. And then if we apply this transcendental knowledge, then we can work dutifully. So it's not that we give up work, but we work out of duty, not because we want to enjoy the fruits of our work. And then if we work in that consciousness, then we are not bound by the reactions. And the next chapter will speak quite a lot about that. So transcendental knowledge removes doubts, gives faith, and also happiness. Okay, so this is last few verses, glorifying transcendental knowledge, which is the title of this chapter. Tasmadakyana sambhutam hritstam vigyana sinatmanaha chitvainam samshayam yogam atotishta bharata. Sita Sundari Mataji.
Therefore, the doubts which have arisen in your heart out of ignorance should be slashed by the weapon of knowledge. Armed with yoga, O Bharat, stand and fight.
Okay, so it's very interesting. Usually, fighting would be armed with a sword or with bow and arrows, but here, armed with yoga, armed with knowledge, stand and fight. There's a very similar verse in the Srimad Bhagavatam in the first canto, second chapter, where with the sword of knowledge cut through the binding knots of reactionary work. So usually we use weapons, something sharp, and in Sanskrit they are called shastra, weapon, or astra, shastra or astra. And then there is shastra, which is scripture. But then scripture, knowledge from the scripture can also be used as a weapon, not just to fight mundane, one or two mundane enemies, but material existence itself, to get out of material existence. Okay, so this transcendental knowledge will lead to elimination of doubts, purification, freedom from bondage, becoming free from sinful reactions. So all these are the results of transcendental knowledge. And if we look at this verse, the doubts which have arisen in your heart out of ignorance should be slashed by the weapon of knowledge. This relates to the fifth reason why Arjuna didn't want to fight. Anyone remembers what was the fifth and last reason?
Was it indecision?
Very good. So indecision can be destroyed by knowledge, transcendental knowledge. And then Prabhupada in the purport, as he so often does in the last verse of a chapter, he summarizes the chapter, sometimes the chapter, sometimes what has gone on so far. And he makes 5 points. I'm just going to kind of read them out. As you study the purport later, you can also have a look at it. So first of all, he speaks about the goal of sacrifice. If one doesn't connect his sacrifice with spiritual realization, then his sacrifice is material, his sacrifice of possession is material. And then the other type of sacrifice is knowledge of the self, which is a pure spiritual activity anyway. Then he speaks about 2 levels of spiritual knowledge. One level is knowing the Atma, that I am the soul. And then the second level, this first level is called Atma Jnana, knowing that I'm the soul, I'm the Atma. And then the second level is knowing about Krishna, who you could say is the Param Atma, the Supreme Soul. And then if somebody follows Bhagavad-gita, they can easily understand both levels of knowledge. And then the third thing is learning about the Lord's transcendental activities. If one doesn't understand them, despite the Lord explaining about them, then he's a fool number one, in Prabhupada's words. Then he speaks about the goal of sacrifice, which it removes ignorance, it gives transcendental knowledge, and then all the different kinds of sacrifice, this celibacy, controlling the senses, practicing mystic yoga, penance, all these different kinds of sacrifice. But the important factor in all of them is self-realization. And then the fifth point is how to properly learn transcendental knowledge, approach a spiritual master in the parampara, and learn from a bona fide guru, not from self-interested people. Okay, so these are some of the themes or topics that were discussed in chapter 4. Now, as we move on to chapter 5, the title of chapter 5, as Sita Sundari kindly reminded us, is Karma Yoga, Action in Krishna Consciousness. Who remembers what was the title of chapter 3?
Karma Yoga.
Very good. So it looks very similar. So what's the difference between chapter 3 and chapter 5? It's not
Action. Sorry.
It's not a trick question. It's very, very, very simple.
Action in Krishna consciousness.
Yeah, and then what makes karma yoga into action in Krishna consciousness is chapter 4. So in between chapter 3 and chapter 5, we had transcendental knowledge. So with this transcendental knowledge, it's not just karma yoga, but it becomes action in Krishna consciousness. Okay?
Mataji, what was that Sanskrit word you said last week that relates to this?
I'm not sure which.
I can't remember. That's why it was, I'm sure there was something. Was it wasn't akarma? Was it akarma or was it? I can't remember. Sorry.
Akarma means it means several things. One of the things is action in Krishna consciousness, because that's not, it doesn't create reactions. It's not a work for selfish reasons. So action in Krishna consciousness can be akarma.
Thank you.
There's that slide from last week that describes all the different meanings of both karma and akarma. Okay, now the link between chapter 4 and chapter 5 is that in chapter 4, in verses 16 to 18, Krishna glorified jnana or knowledge. Then he spoke about action and inaction, inaction, inaction. He glorified renunciation. And then in the last verse, he said, armed with yoga, stand and fight. So again, Arjuna is a bit confused. So should I renounce? Should I become inactive, inaction? Should I just focus on jnana, knowledge? But then why does Krishna say, stand and fight? So that's the link to Arjuna's question in chapter 5. Also remember that when Krishna spoke Bhagavad-gita on the battlefield, he didn't say, okay, Arjuna, this was chapter 4, now we'll start chapter 5. So this was just a conversation, and then the acharyas, they divided it up into chapters. Okay, so this is text 1. Arjuna vacha sanyasam karmanam Krishna punaryogam cha samshasi yacheya etayorekam tanme bruhi sunishchitam. Gunachuda Mataji?
Arjuna said, O Krishna, first of all you asked me to renounce work, and then again you recommend work with devotion. Now will you kindly tell me definitely which of the two is more beneficial?
Thank you. Who remembers where Arjuna asked a very, very similar question?
In the start of chapter 3?
Perfect. Very good. So at the start of chapter 3, Arjuna said, O Janardana and Keshava, why do you want to engage me in this ghastly warfare if you think that intelligence is better than fruitive work? So here again is this, should I follow this path of jnana, renunciation, knowledge, or should I do karma? But if you look at the question in chapter 5 is a bit more in depth, but same idea. So renounce work or work with devotion, which is better. And then when Arjuna asks this question, he uses the word shreya, which is more beneficial. We already learned a little bit about this, that there are two kinds of benefits. One is called shreya and one is called preya. So shreya is long-term benefit. Preya is what's going to be good right now. And shreya is long-term benefit. So if you have an exam tomorrow, then studying for the exam, that's your long-term benefit. and going out to party or watching a film or something, that's a short-term enjoyment, but long-term it doesn't benefit you. But the word Arjuna uses here is shreyas, which means it kind of changes a little bit with the connections, how the words are connected in Sanskrit, but shreya means this long-term benefit. Now, Prabhupada explains that in one sense, Krishna kept Arjuna a little bit confused on purpose, so he can explain this very, very clearly, very much in detail for our benefit. That it's not a question of renouncing work or working, but it's a question of working for Krishna. So whether if one has selfish reasons for either renouncing work or working, then they're more or less the same because they create reactions. But if somebody works for Krishna, then work doesn't create reactions. That's why Prabhupada says that Krishna has perplexed Arjuna and confused his determination. But the reason for that is so that he can explain this in more detail for us. Okay, and let's see Krishna's answer. Shri Bhagavan Uvacha Sannyasa Karma Yogascha Nishreyasa Karagabo Tayostu Karma Sannyasat Karma Yogo Visishyate. Anagasuri Prabhu.
The personality of Godhead replied, the renunciation of work and work in devotion are both good for liberation. But of the two, work in devotional service is better than renunciation of work.
Okay, so here Krishna says they're both good. They both kind of free you from bondage, whether you renounce work or you work for Krishna. But working for Krishna, devotional service is better than renouncing work. Before we go any further, based on your studies so far and your life experience, why is devotional service better than renunciation of work?
Because it keeps your mind occupied on something higher.
Very good. Keeps the mind occupied. What else?
It's a fast track.
Okay. How is it a fast track?
So with the just renunciation of work, you doesn't mean you've got God realization. That will take longer. Whereas with devotional service,
Immediate. Yeah.
immediate realization.
Very good. Very good.
Can I add also that if you artificially renounce work, then you would get the hankering for it later, whereas in devotional service, these things just fall away and you renounce it naturally.
Very good. I can see you still remember chapter 3, even though it was a long time ago. Well done. Thank you. Aline?
I kind of want to compare it to somebody who studies to be a doctor and just reading books about it, and somebody who's actually also doing practice. Because when you practice, it just goes deeper, and it's much more. That's why we have to practice things and do things, because then we're doing them better.
Very good. Yeah. So rather than just theoretical knowledge, renouncing work and just theoretical jnana knowledge, it's better to put the knowledge, and not just the knowledge, but the ultimate goal of knowledge, which is Krishna, put it in practice. Okay. So these are the points that Krishna explained through chapter 3, 4, and especially chapter 3 and 5. And let's look at the purport a little bit. Prabhupada quotes these verses from 5th canto. This chapter 5, canto 5, Prabhupada quotes it quite often. This is the teachings of Rishabdev, as far as I remember, the very important verses. So here he quotes 4 to 6. And he says, those who are mad for sense gratification, they continue in this cycle of birth and death, and for insignificant pleasures and significant pain. So sometimes we may also experience, we get a little bit of pleasure, but then lots of pain. It's like a sandwich, hankering for the pleasure, and then being upset by losing it or suffering the reactions. In this sandwich, the two breads are really thick, and you got a very thin layer of butter or whatever you put in the sandwich. So the hankering is very much, the suffering afterwards is very thick, very much, and then in between you got a little bit of pleasure. And then sense gratification is enjoying these sense objects right now. And karma kanda, or fruitive, Prabhupada calls it fruitive activity, is when you do these things so you can enjoy in the future. And then Prabhupada also explains about proper renunciation in this kind of quite long purport. He quotes a verse from Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu. This is something we will study in more detail when we study Nectar of Devotion. That real renunciation is not renouncing possessions or renouncing things, but using them in Krishna's service. If you just renounce them without understanding their connection to Krishna, then that's false renunciation or falgu vairagya. But understanding that they're connected to Krishna, they're not mine anyway. They're connected to Krishna, so I should use them in Krishna's service. That's real renunciation. So rather than renouncing things or renouncing possessions or renouncing relationships, use them in Krishna's service. Understand that that's their actual purpose. To renounce the enjoying mentality rather than renounce the things, relationships, people. And then Burijan Prabhu says this is the second time that Krishna rejected seeking perfection by dry renunciation and jnana in favor of karma yoga. So karma yoga is better. Because if we work in knowledge, we got transcendental knowledge in the last chapter. If we work in knowledge that purifies the heart, destroys sinful reactions, and solidifies our realizations. Whereas if just renunciation on its own doesn't create more reactions, but doesn't necessarily purify the heart, and also, like Sita Sundari said, doesn't give active engagement. So it's very easy to give that up. So there's no engagement for the senses, so very difficult to keep it up. Okay. So Prabhupada, last sentence. Quite often when you look at the purport by Prabhupada, you can look at the first sentence and the last sentence. They're like little sutras.
Dropped.
Okay, sorry, I'm in Hungary just now and the internet is not great. My apologies for that. Okay. So what I said is the first sentence and the last sentence of Prabhupada's purports are very...
The recording stopped, I believe.
Yeah, for me it shows that...
Is it recording? Okay, it said it had stopped on my end, but...
Yeah? Okay, I stop it and restart it, and then we can be sure that it's recording. For
Probably
me,
when you came back on, it must have come up. Maybe just when you fell off.
okay.
I think it's recording. I can see up here now.
Okay.
Sorry.
Okay, good. Thank you. Okay. Now let's see the next. Oh yeah. So the last sentence. This perfect form of action in Krishna consciousness is far better than any amount of artificial renunciation by a sannyasi of the Mayavadi school. Okay, so that's like the conclusion or the summary. Leon or Gunachuda?
What do you mean by sutra?
Oh, sorry. This is like sutra is a Sanskrit word that means like a very concise truth or summary of something.
Okay. Do you
Like
think it's the same? Sorry.
you got like Vedanta Sutra, which is the Vedanta means the end or the conclusion of the Vedas, and then it's in sutras, like just little phrases or sentences.
So, do you think this is something we should consider, like if we're writing an essay, then at the start of like a paragraph and the end of a paragraph, or like the start of the essay and the end of the essay, it should be like that?
That's a really good thing to do. So when you start your introduction, you can just make your, like a sutra, make like you could even
Thesis.
yeah. So you could just say what you're gonna say, and in the conclusion, say what you said, but it shouldn't be the same sentence. So by the end of the essay, you should have got to somewhere deeper than at the beginning. Okay, but that's a really good thing to do. And then if we read Prabhupada's purpose, we can learn a lot from that. Okay? Geya sanitya sannyasi yona dveshti kankshati nirdvandvo hi mahabaho sukham bandhat pramuchyate. Madhira Mataji?
Hare Krishna. One who neither hates nor desires the fruits of his activities is known to be always renounced. Such a person, free from all dualities, easily overcomes material bondage and is completely liberated, O mighty armed Arjuna.
Thank you. So in these verses, Krishna emphasizes that it's not the thing itself, but our emotions towards the thing that causes the entanglement, the bondage, the reactions. So don't hate them, don't desire them. But the only way we decide whether to engage with something or not is whether can I use it in Krishna's service. So this person who doesn't hate things and doesn't desire things, they are free from dualities because there is no, this is good, this is bad. There are none of these dualities. Their only consideration is how can I use it in Krishna's service? And then such a person is also not dependent on external circumstances because devotional service can go on in any circumstance. Even if somebody doesn't have fragrant flowers to offer, they can offer the flowers in their mind. Or, doesn't have so much facility for devotional service can go on in the mind. So, an important sutra is that is renunciation not of action, but in action. Meaning you don't give up the activity, you carry on working, you carry on the activity, but you renounce the results, you renounce the desire to enjoy it, which means that you work with renunciation. You don't renounce the work, but you work with renunciation. Okay, this is a theme that will keep coming up in this chapter. So it's important to understand. So one acts, but not for enjoyment, not for the fruits, but for Krishna. And if one can work in this way, then he's a true sannyasi, he's a true renouncer, because he has neither desire nor hatred for the fruits of his work, for the results of his work. Anagasuri Prabhu?
I have a question on this. Sometimes I find this is difficult. Like, for example, when you've made a food prep for Krishna, and I feel really bad because I'm putting it on the plate to offer, but I'm salivating, and I feel bad doing that. But how, obviously, you can't artificially be renounced. So is this something that just comes with knowledge or like
Purification.
Yeah.
So first of all, I'd really like to thank you for your honesty, and both for yourself and for sharing it with everyone else. I think we all go through these things. And the first stage, it is that it is very tasty, but first I offer to Krishna. So the sacrifice there is that I don't eat it right away, but I make that effort to offer it to Krishna. And as you follow the process, as the heart becomes more and more purified, as your love or affection for Krishna becomes stronger and stronger, it becomes more and more that it's really, really tasty. So I want to give it to Krishna because I love Krishna. So it becomes more and more about him and less about I want the tasty food. So if you just follow the process, it will become, it will natural. Like you say, we can't artificially. It's not possible. But if at least you do the externals and want to do the internals as well, then it will naturally come. Just like, when you cook for Sundari, it may be something very tasty, but you want her to enjoy it. Like when you got children, you don't want to eat their food, even no matter how tasty it is, because you get more enjoyment from them being happy with the food than from you eating it. So at a certain point, it becomes like that with Krishna, that or even with devotees, you cook for devotees and you don't mind if there is nothing left for you, because you're so happy just seeing them enjoying the prasadam. That's more enjoyment than you taking that prasadam. Is that okay? Okay. Thank you for asking that question. Sankhya yoga pritak bala pravadanti na pandita ekam apyastita samyak upayor vindate phalam. Hitu Prabhu?
Only the ignorant speak of devotional service, karma yoga, as being different from the analytical study of the material world, Sankhya. Those who are actually learned say that he who applies himself well to one of these paths achieves the results of both.
Thank you. So these are not two separate paths with separate goals. So devotional service, now karma yoga, we know that technically karma yoga is not quite devotional service. Karma yoga is working with knowledge that there is some transcendental goal. But like I said so many times, Prabhupada, even in chapter 5, he already gives the conclusion of chapter 18. So that's why sometimes, or in fact quite often, he translates karma yoga as devotional service. Okay? So don't get confused by that. But these two processes, karma yoga or devotional service and analytical study or Sankhya, they are two paths, but they lead to the same goal. And we already know about devotional service, how that leads to Krishna. Now, this Sankhya, as far as I know in Hindi also, but in Sanskrit, it means counting. So this analytical study means you study the material world, you try to find the origin of everything, you kind of go further and further and further in your analysis, trying to find the origin, and then you find the origin, which is the Supreme Lord, and then what do? You serve him, you serve Vishnu. But I think somebody already mentioned that this takes two steps. So first step is find the origin and then serve the origin. Whereas with devotional service, we just accept based on Shastra, based on Guru, Sadhus, that Krishna is the Supreme Lord and we serve him. So the way Burijan Prabhu, or maybe Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur explains it, is that Sankhya Yoga is like you got a stone in your hand, but you want to pick up an axe. So Sankhya Yoga means you put down the stone and you pick up the axe. Whereas with devotional service, it's not two separate movements, but as you pick up the axe, the stone is naturally dropped. Okay, so it's just as you do devotional service, naturally all other things are fulfilled. For example, you naturally give up attachment, you naturally gain knowledge, you naturally do all the other things. So Sankhya and devotional service have the same goal, but Sankhya is a bit more convoluted, takes longer. Okay. Yat Sankhya prapyate sthanam yat tad yogarapi gamyate ekam Sankyam cha yogam cha yapashyati sapashyati. Sarva Lakshmataji, are you able to read?
Yes. One who knows that the position reached by means of analytical study can also be attained by devotional service and who therefore sees analytical study and devotional service to be on the same level, sees things as they are.
So, same Prabhupada and also Krishna emphasized the same point. So here he said, Sankhya and Karma Yoga or devotional service have the same goal, achieves the same results. And here also one who understands that these two lead to the same position, yapashyati sapashyati, they see things as they are. One who sees like this actually sees. So there are a diversity of paths, but the unity of goals. Of course, we know that not all paths lead to the same goal, but these two do. One is acting, and one is renunciation. But renunciation is giving up the material world first and then becoming attached to Krishna, whereas with devotional service, as you are becoming attached to Krishna, you naturally give up the material world. Now this yapashyati, sapashyati, one who sees in this way actually sees. I wanted to explain that a little bit. So one who sees in this way sees reality. When we look at something, what we see depends on our prior knowledge. So I don't know if I made a slide for this. Let me just check. No. Okay, so if you look at an X-ray, a picture of an X-ray, are there any doctors among us? No. Okay, so if somebody looks at an X-ray picture of a lung, then if I look at it, I can recognize, okay, it's a lung, you can see the ribs, but that's about it. But if somebody is a doctor, then they can look at the picture and see if there is any obstruction in the lung or if there is any injury or any other disease because of their prior knowledge. So me and the doctor look at the same picture, but due to prior knowledge, we see different things. So in the same way, if we have this knowledge that Krishna is giving us in Bhagavad-gita, then we might be seeing the same thing as somebody else on the street, but we see different things. But Sita Sundari mentioned earlier is a very good example of this, that, some mundane happening, the World Cup going on or whatever, if we look at the World Cup through the eyes of scripture, then we'll see something very different than if we just, I don't know, an everyday person on the street. So based on our prior knowledge, then we see the same thing differently. Okay. So that's why we need this knowledge, and then we can see things as they are. Yapashyati, sapashyati. Prabhupada says, detachment from matter and attachment to Krishna are one and the same. One who sees this sees things as they are. Sanyasastu mahabaho dukkhamaptum mayogata yoga yukto munir brahma nachirena dikachati. Leon, if you read the verse and then I don't know who's got the question, then you can also say that.
Merely renouncing all activities yet not engaging in the devotional service of the Lord cannot make one happy, but a thoughtful person engaged in devotional service can achieve the supreme Bhagavad-gita. I just wanted to ask about.
I can't hear you now. Yeah, I think you're just okay.
I just wanted to ask about that last sentence.
Mm-hmm.
Detachment from matter and attachment to Krishna are one and the same. One who can see sees things as they are. So does that mean, this might be a stupid question, but does that mean that always if someone's detached from matter, then they can only be attached to Krishna?
So if somebody is attached to matter, then they can only be attached.
I'm asking if if someone is detached from matter, does that always mean they're attached to Krishna?
No, and it's a really good point that you bring this up. So somebody like Gyanis, they are detached from matter, but they're not attached to Krishna. But the problem is that the soul by nature needs to be attached to something. And that's why just being detached from matter is not a sustainable existence. So Prabhupada doesn't go into detail here, but if we want to kind of understand it in more depth, you can only be really detached from matter. It's only possible to become detached from matter in a long-term sustainable way if you are attached to Krishna. That's why it's one and the same. Is it?
So could someone, what would you be? Would you just sort of be floating around?
So they have this Brahman realization. They become liberated from matter. Brahman realization where there is no material suffering, but also no kind of qualities, forms, relationships. It's just this oneness. And when you've been suffering, then that's a very pleasant feeling. It's basically like zero, coming from negative to zero. But because the soul by nature needs something positive, then after a while the zero is not satisfying. So if you think about maybe when you've been really sick, you feel dizzy, you feel like you're throwing up, you got a headache, you got a temperature, you feel really horrible. And then after a few days, you feel better. You're still in bed, but you don't have the headache, you don't feel like throwing up. So it's a pleasant feeling. I'm not sick, I don't have a headache. But then after a while, just lying in bed and not feeling sick is not enough. You want to do a bit more than that. So you want to kind of do things. So in the same way, becoming free from material suffering is that this zero, this liberation, which first feels really good. But then after a while it becomes boring because there is no relationships, no qualities, no activities. That's when the soul either comes back to the material world because the desire for activities is strong, so strong, or if he's fortunate enough, then he can move on to the spiritual, the positive activities, relationships, qualities. Does that answer your question? Is that okay?
Yeah, that's perfect.
Okay. And I don't know if somebody else said something or that's Haribo, Sundari. Do you have a point that you would want to share with us? Okay, tell us.
Picture.
Thank you. I'm sure it's a picture of Krishna. Okay. Let's see the next. Yeah, we read the translation. So, Leon, you asked something very, how would you say, relevant because Krishna in one sentence summarized what I just said in about, I don't know, 20 sentences. So just renouncing activities, not engaging in devotional service doesn't make one happy. Okay, so that was the answer, I guess, to the question. Okay, so this Brahman realization that Prabhupada speaks in the purport, that also this verse speaks about just renouncing activities, it kind of sounds quite exciting. I am Brahman. It's very satisfying for the ego, very exciting for the false ego, but it doesn't give real satisfaction to the heart. And also, this path means that everybody has to take sannyas, everybody has to give up everything completely. So there are no householders, no gulab jamuns. So kind of giving up everything. It's a very difficult path. And also, there is no real juice. There is no real taste. There is a lot of intellectual kind of word wrangling, philosophizing, but no real taste for the heart. And that's why it doesn't make one happy. But a thoughtful person engaged in devotional service achieves Krishna without delay. And you could also say that this verse 6, is the summary of this first section of chapter 5, which is that karma yoga or nishkam karma yoga is easier than renouncing work. Let me just find the slide. So this is nishkam karma yoga is easier than renouncing work. If you remember when we started, I asked you why is it easier to work in devotional service than to renounce work, and then you all came up with very good results. So this is what Krishna spoke about in this first section, and now he will speak about the performance of this nishkam karma yoga. What does nishkama mean?
Without desires?
Very good. So working for the Supreme without desires. Very good. Okay, so let's see that. Yoga yukto vishuddhatma vijitatma jitendriya sarvabhutatma bhutatma kurvanapi nalipyate. Sita Vallabhi Mataji, are you able to read or?
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes. One who works in devotion, who is a pure soul and who controls his mind and senses is dear to everyone, and everyone is dear to him. Though always working, such a man is never entangled.
Thank you. So there are three qualities mentioned here. One, he is purified, he's a pure soul. Two, he's got devotion. And three, he controls the mind and senses. So somebody who's got these three qualities, they may be working, but they are not bound, don't get entangled. If you think about it, even in the forest, if somebody doesn't have these qualities, then they're still bound, they're still entangled because they're still going to collect their berries to enjoy, they're still breathing, they're still doing things. And because they're doing those things for their own enjoyment, then they become entangled. On the other hand, somebody may be a householder, may have wife, children, maybe working in an office or working somewhere in the world, but if they have connection with Krishna, if they have devotion, they're purified, they control their mind and senses, they're regulated, then they're not entangled, even though it seems like they're doing the same thing as the next person. Next person is getting entangled, but they're not, because although the external activity is the same, the internal motivation is very, very different. And then this person is Sarva Bhutatma Bhutatma, which means he's compassionate to all living entities. So he's dear to everyone, and everyone is dear to him. So somebody who's a devotee is dear to everyone, and everyone is dear to him. He sees everyone in connection with Krishna. So he doesn't relate to people in a way, what can I get out of them? How can I use these people for my enjoyment, whether subtly or grossly? But he just sees that these are parts and parcels of Krishna, they're Krishna's servant, they may not realize it yet. So just as I love Krishna, I love them also. And then people can quite often sense this, that you don't want anything from them. And they quite often have this trust or openness towards devotees because they can sense that devotees don't want anything from them. Okay. Anagasuri Prabhu?
Mata, I just wanted to ask with the Sanskrit verse, because it said Bhut Atma. So it's one word there, Sarva Bhutatma, Bhutatma, but it's split here. So what does Bhuta mean? Do you know?
Bhuta means living entity. It can mean different things, but here it means living entity. Sometimes it means ghost, but here it means living entity.
Thank you.
And then in the purport, also there is something interesting. We can kind of look back to what we learned in chapter 3. So Prabhupada says, because he's pure in consciousness, his mind is completely controlled. And because his mind is controlled, his senses are also controlled. Okay, so if you remember at the end of chapter 3, we learned about this hierarchy, the sense objects, the senses, mind, intelligence, the soul, super soul. So here this is also mentioned, the right way it should be controlled. So the soul is controlled by the super soul, meaning by Krishna. and then the soul controls the intelligence, intelligence controls the mind, mind controls the senses. It doesn't get into so much the detail, but because his consciousness, his soul is related, fixed on Krishna, then his mind is controlled, and then the mind controls the senses. Okay. Naiva kinchit karomiti yukto manyita tatvavid pasyan shinvan sprishan jigran ashnan gachan swapan shvasan pralapan visrijan grinan unmishan nimishan api indriyan indriyarteshu vartanta iti tharayan. Gunachuda Mataji?
A person in the divine consciousness, although engaged in seeing, hearing, touching, smelling, eating, moving about, sleeping, and breathing, always knows within himself that he actually does nothing at all. Because while speaking, evacuating, receiving, or opening or closing his eyes, he always knows that only the material senses are engaged with their objects and that he is aloof from them.
Thank you. So this again explains what we just said, that he's working, he's acting in the world the same as everybody else does. He's touching, smelling, eating, moving about, sleeping, breathing. But because his consciousness is different, then he doesn't become entangled, he doesn't become bound by it. So all the work or the senses work the same way as everybody else's senses work, but because his consciousness is different, then he doesn't become entangled. He knows that it's just the material senses are engaged with their objects, and he's aloof from them. He's not attached to it. So when he's speaking, he knows that, okay, this is my voice box, my whatever else is engaged, my tongue, my mouth, everything else, whatever else is engaged in the speaking. Now, it doesn't mean that every time he opens his eyes, it becomes like a whole analytical study of all the muscles that involved in opening the eyes. But there is this general understanding. And when he works, when he does anything, then he understands that it's just the material senses are engaged with the material sense objects, and I'm separate from them. So this is something we can practice, but at the same time, it's not something that's artificially we can force upon ourselves. But if we keep thinking about this, keep trying to practice it, pray to Krishna, practice the process of Krishna consciousness, then it becomes more and more natural, and we become more and more detached from the results of our work. We do the best we can. We work dutifully. We do the best we can, but we are not as emotionally invested in the outcome, in the result. Okay. Now this verse kind of also starts a topic that will be discussed in this chapter and also later in Bhagavad-gita about who is the doer. Because this person is doing things, but he knows that he's not the doer, it's just the material senses engaged with their objects, he's aloof from them. So who's the actual doer? Now we already already kind of chapter 3 already spoke about that a little bit, that it's just some prakriti kriyamanani gunai karmani sarvasha, somebody who's doesn't have knowledge, thinks that he's the doer, but it's actually material nature. But it's a little bit more complicated than that. So when the lumberjack cuts down a tree, who's cutting the tree?
The axe.
Well, it's the axe, but impelled by the desire to cut the tree.
Yeah, so the axe on its own doesn't cut anything, it's just lying there. Technically, it's the axe cutting down the tree. But the axe wouldn't cut the tree unless the lumberjack wanted to cut the tree and unless Krishna sanctioned the desire of the lumberjack. Because If Krishna doesn't sanction it, then the arms don't move, doesn't have the energy to cut. So there are actually these three doers. And when Krishna says that somebody thinks that he's the doer, but it's actually just material nature. Material nature you could compare to the X. That's also true, and that's to kind of emphasize that we shouldn't become proud that we are doing everything. But there are these three doers. This is more kind of a different example of the same thing, that if somebody wants a house, then they are the initiating cause. So they decide, I want a house, but I need a mortgage for that, or I need a loan. So they go to the bank sanctions the loan, and then there is the instrumental cause, which is the workman who actually put the house together. So all three are causes. So without the workman, there would be no house. Without the bank giving the loan, there would be no house. And without a person having that initial desire, there would be no house. But the only person who's responsible for that house being there is the person who had the initial desire. So next is the same principle, but with the jiva and material nature and the super soul. So the initiating cause is us, the living entity. The sanctioning cause is the super soul, Krishna, and the instrumental cause who carries it out is the three modes of material nature or material nature. Now, who's responsible for it is only us. Material nature is not responsible, just like the axe is not responsible for cutting down the tree. The Supreme Lord is also not responsible because he just sanctions it. It was our desire. He's not involved. So only we are responsible. Okay, this thing will come up again, just to kind of have an initial understanding of these three causes. Then, if you want to go into more detail, there are other causes as well, but these are the three main causes.
Can I ask a question?
Please.
So just using the lumberjack, so the initiating cause is our desire.
Uh-huh.
We pick up the axe. The sanctioning part, like that wouldn't look like all of a sudden we couldn't move the axe, most likely. But it would be what something gets in the way of, maybe something happens. How does that look? Because if you have a desire to do something and it's just simple as picking up something and doing it, what does the sanctioning look like?
It is
A third
it can be that something suddenly happens, a bear or a wolf appears and he has to run away. But it may be as much as, his arm is paralyzed, or he remembers that he left the pot on the stove, or whatever else. But if whatever we do, Krishna sanctions it if we both desire it and deserve it. So I might want to become a millionaire. I have the desire, but if I don't deserve it, I won't become a millionaire because Krishna won't sanction it. Now, with cutting down a tree, in one sense, it's very different, but at the same time, when somebody becomes really old, they've cut down their quota of trees, then they just don't have the strength to cut down. They cut down 1,000 trees, but they don't have the strength to cut down the 1,001. So whatever happens, then if the super soul doesn't sanction it, it doesn't happen.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Anagasuri Prabhu?
Could you just boil it down to that it's karma, basically?
In what sense? Is it
So whatever you're doing, even though you have to tapa, it's all. Is it no?
It's not just karma, is the situations that we find ourselves in. And then how we react to those situations, that's how we create our next karma. So
Thank you.
somebody finding themselves being a lumberjack, that was their desire from their last life, or maybe as a child. And then how they are acting in this life will determine their next life. But the karma is what you get, the situations you get, the situations you find yourself in, and then how you respond to those situations creates your next karma or your next akarma. So if you respond to it devotionally, then it doesn't create any more karma, any more entanglement, but it takes you closer to Krishna. If you respond to it in a selfish way, then it can create more good karma or bad karma.
Because I was thinking, Lomsaki, you've cut that tree, but
Mhm.
that tree was destined to be cut by you because of some karma.
That tree was destined to be cut, whether it's by you or by someone else. Let's just let's kind of move away from the tree a little bit. Let's say that somebody at your you go to work tomorrow and somebody is really nasty to you. So that thing that happened to you, that somebody was really nasty to you, that can be your karma. Now that somebody, let's say your boss was really nasty, the fact that the boss decided that I'm going to be nasty to you is still, he created his own karma by that. He was an instrument in giving you the karma, but it doesn't free him from the responsibility for being nasty. And then in his next life, then either you or it may be somebody else who will be nasty to him. But that's what he deserved. And how he responds to it, is he nasty back? Then he's creating more reaction. Does he just read Bhagavad-gita and decide that I'm not getting involved? He doesn't create more reaction. Is this
Thanks. Yeah.
understandable? Okay.
Great question.
Please. Oh, I thought you had another. Yeah, it's a very good question. Yeah. Okay. And then just a general point relating to this verse is that we all have some inevitable needs we need to fulfill. We need to eat, we need to sleep, we need to defend ourselves. There are certain things we need to do. But if we just fulfill those needs to a level that we can be peaceful, then and use our energy to serve Krishna, then we don't become entangled. But if these become like the main focus of our life, then that creates karma, that creates entanglement. So eat to live, but not live to eat. Brahmanyadhaya karmani sangam tyaktva karotiya lipyatena sapapena padmapatram mivambasa. Elaine?
One who performs his duty without attachment, surrendering the results unto the Supreme Lord, is unaffected by sinful action, as the lotus leaf is untouched by water.
Thank you. So it's a very beautiful analogy. There's a lot of nice analogies in Bhagavad-gita. So the lotus is in the water, but it's still untouched by the water. The water just glides off it because it's got this waxy surface. So in the same way, the devotee is in the world, but not of the world. So in the world, but not touched by the world, because he doesn't have any goals, any desires to fulfill in this world. So he's not touched by whatever's going on. Of course, you could say there's ups and downs, sometimes also in the pond there are some waves and the lotus moves a little, but it doesn't move its essence, you could say. So in the same way, we live in this world, there are ups and downs. We may move a little bit, but because our essence is much, much deeper and is connected to Krishna, it doesn't touch us as much, or it doesn't affect us as much as somebody whose whole existence, their whole purpose of life is connected to this world. So with this Krishna consciousness, we can also create this waxy surface. So material things can just glide off. We are not affected by it. So this point of being in the world, but not of the world. This is what Krishna is teaching Arjuna. So if somebody has this kind of consciousness, then what's the purpose of their acting? Why are they still acting? Kayena manasa buddhya kevala indriyarapi yogina karma kurvante sangam tyaktva shuthaye. Sita Sundari Mataji?
The yogis, abandoning attachment, act with body, mind, intelligence, and even with the senses, only for the purpose of purification.
Okay, so this is the answer. Why do they act? What's the purpose of their acting? Is for purification. And of course, on a higher level to please Krishna. This Atma Shuddhaye, purifying the self or purifying themselves. Now, in this verse, it says, even with the senses. So there are different ways to understand this, acting even with the senses. So one way to understand it is the senses are usually the ones that bind us, or they're in touch with the sense objects. So usually they bind us, but if we abandon attachment and act with even with the senses for Krishna or with purification, then rather than binding us, they can be helpful for purifying us. So at the conditioned stage, speaking, hearing entangles us, brings us down. At the liberated stage, Rupa Goswami prays for thousands of tongues and thousands of ears so he can chant the holy name and hear the holy name more and more. So the senses that would bind one, if they use them for Krishna, then the same senses liberate one. Or another way of understanding it, even with the senses, is that sometimes it's difficult to fully engage the mind. We may be chanting, but the mind is a million miles away. We are not really hearing the holy names. But then at least engage the senses. So at least carry on chanting with the mouth, with the tongue, try to hear it at least physically. And then that will gradually pull the mind back as well. I'm not recommending just going through the motions with the senses, but at least do it with the senses and then gradually do it with the mind and body as well. And then Baladev Vidyabhushan, he says this purification, it refers to giving up the false identification with the body as the self that we have maintained since time immemorial. So purification in one sense means becoming free from thinking that I'm the body, that I'll be happy through the body. Okay, so becoming free from this bodily identification. Okay. Yukta karma param tyaktva shanti mafyati naishtikim ayukta kama karena pali sakto nibadyate. Sita Valabi Mataji? Okay, Hitu Prabhu?
The steadily devoted soul attains unadulterated peace because he offers the result of all activities to me, whereas a person who is not in union with the divine, who is greedy for the fruits of his labor, becomes entangled.
Thank you. So this summarizes the previous about 5 verses. So you attain peace if you offer the activities to me. Peace here means that you're not entangled, you don't create more karma, more suffering, more bondage. But somebody who's not in union with the divine, who is greedy for the fruits of his labor, meaning he wants to enjoy it, he doesn't want to offer it to Krishna, then he becomes entangled. So this verse compares the attached worker to the unattached worker. Previously, the comparison was between somebody who works and somebody who renounces work. But now it's somebody who works with attachment and somebody who doesn't renounce work, but renounces the fruits of the work or renounces the desire to enjoy the fruits of the work. And again, like we said so many times, it's not the action, it's not the work that causes the bondage, but the motivation, the selfish motivation. So Krishna is telling Arjuna, you want peace, you want unadulterated peace, so you'll get that peace by working for me, not by giving up your work as a kshatriya and leaving the battlefield. And then Prabhupada in the purport explains that attachment is unavoidable. The only, as spirit souls, we need to be attached to someone or something. The only choice we have is, do we become attached to Krishna or do we become attached to Maya? And then that choice will determine our destination. Sarva karmani manasa sannyasasti sukham vashi navadvare pure dehi naiva kurvan nakarayan. Anagasuri Prabhu?
When the embodied living being controls his nature and mentally renounces all actions, he resides happily in the city of 9 gates, the material body, neither working nor causing work to be done.
Thank you. So this verse or this section will continue discussing the 3 doers. Who are the 3 doers?
Mind, intelligence, and false ego.
No.
No?
The subtle body.
The desire, the sanction, and the implementation.
Yeah, so the desirer, who's the jiva, the living entity, the sanctioner, the super soul, and the implementer, which is material nature. So these are the 3 doers or the 3 causes of action. So this is what this verse starts to speak about. Now, there is this kind of, it's not completely black and white in the sense that we don't give up all activities, bodily needs need to be fulfilled, but there is no emotional entanglement with the sense object. So it's not like give up all activities, but do what you need to do, but don't be emotionally entangled, because to the extent that we think we are going to enjoy the sense objects, to that extent we become entangled and bound. So Krishna is telling Arjuna, you are a kshatriya, you have a kshatriya nature, you can't give up fighting. You will fight, that's the kind of body you have. You can't act as a sannyasi. So act as a kshatriya, but don't identify with it completely. Don't become too emotionally entangled. You are still a soul. You are still a spirit soul. There's this verse that when somebody does puja, before doing puja, they say this, Naham vipra nachnarapatir napi vaishyo nashudro naham var nachagrihapatir navanastoyatirva kintu projyanikila paramananda purnamritabder gopi bhartu padakamalayar dasa dasana dasa. This is to kind of make us more conscious just before doing puja that I'm not a vipra, I'm not a brahmana, I'm not a kshatriya, I'm not a vaishya, I'm not a shudra, I'm not a sannyasi, I'm not a grihastha, I'm not a vanaprastha, I'm not a brahmachari. All I am is Krishna's servant. So I act in this world, but I know that I'm Krishna's servant. And then somebody who has this kind of consciousness, he lives happily in the city of 9 gates. In one sense, one second I explained that. He's neither working nor causing work to be done. Now, he is working, but he's not getting the reaction of his work. That's what it's meant by he's not working. And he's not the cause of his work in the sense he doesn't get the reaction for it. And the 9 gates, Prabhupada explains in the purport, are these 2 eyes, 2 nostrils, 2 ears, 1 mouth, 1 anus, and 1 genital. So it's sometimes the body is compared to a city, and just as the city has gates, Eastern Gate, Lion's Gate, different gates, the same way the body also has gates. So the gates are where knowledge comes in, and the gates where the actions kind of go out. This is where the body interacts with the world, and this is where it's easy to get bound. But if we understand that things may come in and out, just like, if you get a gate, cars come into the city, cars go out the city, but I'm not the cars. And I'm not somebody who understands that I'm not the body, I'm not even the city. I live in the city, but I'm not the city. So this kind of city, the body as a city, it's this analogy. This is just one verse in Bhagavad-gita, or one or two verses. But in the Srimad Bhagavatam, as far as I remember, it's 5 or 6 chapters in the 4th canto, either the 4th or 5th canto. This story of Puranjana is a very, very elaborate whole story about the city of 9 gates. Yeah, it's 4th canto, chapter 25 to 29. Okay. Let's try to do one more verse quickly. Nakartritvam nakarmani lokasya srijati prabhu nakarma phala samyogam svabhavastu pravartate. Sarvalakshmataji.
The embodied spirit, master of the city of his body, does not create activities, nor does he induce people to act, nor does he create the fruits of action. All this is enacted by the modes of material nature.
Thank you. So what is the result of this detached consciousness? Is that the embodied spirit, even though he lives in the body, he's embodied, he doesn't create activities, he doesn't induce others to act, to work, and he also doesn't become attached. So for all intents and purposes, he's liberated. Krishna uses this word na 3 times. Na kartitvam, na karmani, na karma phala samyoga. This is to emphasize it. As long as the soul thinks that he's the doer, he gets reactions, he creates consequences for himself. But if he understands the body is just a machine, it carries out certain things, but it's not me, then he's not bound. Bhagavad-gita gives very deep and complex philosophy, but the conclusion is very simple. Chant and be happy. Okay? So there's a lot of philosophy, a lot of technical details, but the conclusion is chant and be happy. We need the knowledge to kind of, when we have doubts, or kind of keep our understanding up, but the conclusion is very, very simple. Now, for next week, when we continue reading, we start understanding that if the soul is not the doer, then who's ultimately controlling material nature? And then the answer is that the super soul is the ultimate controller. And then if he is the ultimate controller, is he not responsible for my actions, for my sinful actions? Because, I'm just a little jiva. After all, it's Krishna who sanctions everything. So should the responsibility not go to him? And then to remove this misconception, then Krishna will speak the next verse that we will read next week. Leon or Gunachuda?
If the embodied spirit does not create activities, then where does the desire for, like, where does the material desire come from? Is it the subtle body, or?
So the embodied spirit, somebody who has this consciousness it spoke about before, that he's detached from all the actions of his body, that kind of embodied spirit doesn't create activities. So this verse speaks about a liberated person, somebody who's in the body, but
I see, okay.
not attached to the body, that's not emotionally involved with the body.
Okay.
Okay.
Just one thing. Sorry, it's a bit silly, but nor does he induce people to act. So how does that work if you're running a business and you do induce people to act?
in the same way as you don't act and you don't induce others to act. So because you are not emotionally involved, because you are not acting for yourself, you're not acting on a selfish platform, then even if you do induce others to act, then you don't get the reaction for it. So Arjuna is like a general in this army, not the main general, but one of the generals, you could say. He's telling people how to fight, but because he's detached from it, he's not. It's as if he wasn't.
Thank you.
Okay. So it's quite technical, very philosophical, but like we said, chant Hare Krishna and be happy. Okay. So with that, thank you very much for coming. It's always really, really nice to see your enthusiasm for Bhagavad-gita, your absorption, to hear your realization. So thank you for that. And see you next Monday. Have a wonderful week. Hare Krishna. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Srimad
Jai.
Bhagavad Gita ki jai.
Yeah.
Sadhu Seva Sadhu Sangha ki jai.
Yeah.
Jai Gaur Premanandi Jai.
Hare Hare Bol.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Hare Krishna.
Hari Bol. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Very good.